Where do you think you're going like that? The millionaire said, then hired her as his fake wife. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The elevator doors slid open on the 42nd floor of the Harrington Grand Hotel, and the sound of polished shoes, low conversations, and clinking glassware filled the air. It was the kind of floor where people moved with certainty, where tailored suits and silk dresses belonged, and where mistakes were not welcome. She stepped out quietly, pushing a gray cleaning cart with one hand and holding her time card in the other. Her name was Elena Brooks. She wore a navy blue janitor uniform that had been washed too many times, the sleeves slightly frayed at the cuffs. Her hair was pulled into a neat bun, not for style, but because it made work easier. Tonight was not supposed to be complicated. She had been called in to clean a private corridor before a late executive event ended. In and out. That was the plan. But the moment she took 2 steps forward, everything stopped. A tall man turned from a cluster of executives near the glass wall overlooking the city. He was in his late 30s, broad-shouldered, dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Elena earned in 3 months. His presence alone seemed to quiet the space. This was Alexander Reed, the billionaire owner of the hotel chain, a man whose name appeared in business magazines and whose decisions moved markets. His eyes swept over the hallway, then landed on her. His expression hardened, not with anger, but with something colder. Disapproval, ownership of the space. "Where do you think you are going like that?" he said, his voice calm, controlled, and loud enough to carry. The conversations around them faltered. A few heads turned. Someone shifted uncomfortably. Elena stopped walking. She felt every pair of eyes in the hallway settle on her uniform, her worn shoes, the yellow caution sign clipped to her cart. She did not answer right away. She had learned long ago that reacting too quickly only made things worse. "I am scheduled to clean this corridor, sir," she said evenly, keeping her voice low and respectful. "Facilities called me up." Alexander glanced at her cart, then back at her face, as if she were an inconvenience he had not planned for. "This floor is restricted during events," he replied. "You do not belong here right now." The words were not shouted. They did not need to be. The humiliation landed just the same. Elena swallowed. She felt heat rise to her cheeks, but she did not look away. "With respect," she said, "this is my job." For a moment, something flickered in Alexander's eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or annoyance at being challenged. He looked around at the executives waiting for him, then back at her again. "Finish later," he said flatly. "Leave." The silence that followed was heavy. Elena nodded once. She turned her cart slowly, her movements controlled, her posture straight. She did not rush. She did not apologize again. As she walked back toward the service elevator, she could feel the weight of the moment pressing against her spine. This was not the first time she had been reminded of where she stood in places like this, but tonight, it cut deeper. The elevator doors closed, and the polished world disappeared. Inside the metal box, Elena finally exhaled. Her fingers trembled slightly as she pressed the button for the service floor. She told herself it did not matter. She told herself she had rent due in 6 days, a medical bill sitting unopened on her kitchen table, and no room for pride. Still, the words echoed in her head. "You do not belong here." What she did not know was that, on the other side of those elevator doors, Alexander Reed was still standing exactly where he had been, watching the numbers above the doors descend. And for the first time that night, his attention was no longer on the executives waiting for him, the deal he was about to close, or the image he carefully protected. It was on the woman he had just dismissed. Because in a few minutes, Alexander Reed was going to make a decision that would change both of their lives. And it would not begin with an apology. Elena did not cry on the way home. She saved that for later. Her apartment was a 1-bedroom unit above a closed laundromat on the south side of the city. 600 square feet. Thin walls, a radiator that knocked all night like it was trying to escape. She kicked off her shoes by the door and stood there for a long moment, still in her uniform, still hearing his voice in her head. "You do not belong here." She crossed the room and placed her cleaning badge on the small kitchen table. Right beside it sat an unopened envelope from the hospital. She already knew what it said. She had known for 3 days now. Her mother's follow-up treatment was not fully covered. The remaining balance was $4,800, due in 30 days. Elena lowered herself into the chair and rubbed her temples. She worked 6 days a week, sometimes 7, early mornings, late nights, office buildings, hotels, private residences she was never meant to be seen in. Even then, the math did not work. Rent was due in 6 days, utilities in 9, and her manager had already warned her that overtime was being cut. She thought about calling her sister. Then she stopped herself. Everyone was already drowning. The next morning, Elena was back at the Harrington Grand before sunrise. Same uniform, same cart, same quiet determination. She scrubbed floors no one noticed, and emptied trash cans that smelled like money and indifference. No one mentioned the night before. No one apologized. Life moved on. Until just after 10. Her supervisor approached her near the supply room, her expression unreadable. "Elena," she said carefully, "there is someone upstairs asking for you." Elena frowned. "Asking for me?" "Yes," the woman replied. "Specifically." He said it was urgent. Elena's stomach tightened. She wiped her hands on a rag and followed her supervisor toward the executive elevators. The doors opened, and standing inside was Alexander Reed. Not in a rush this time, not surrounded by executives. He looked at her the way people did when they were about to make an offer, not an apology. "Elena Brooks," he said, reading her name slowly, as if testing it. "I need to speak with you, in private." She met his gaze, her spine straight. This time, she did not step back. And whatever he was about to say, it was not going to be small. Alexander did not raise his voice this time. They stood inside a small conference room just off the executive floor, glass walls frosted for privacy. The city stretched beyond the windows, distant and indifferent. Elena remained standing near the door. Alexander took the seat at the head of the table, folding his hands as if this were a business meeting, because, to him, it was. "I will be direct," he said. "I do not have much time." Elena said nothing. She waited. "I need a wife," Alexander continued, his tone measured. "Not a relationship, not romance, a role." Elena blinked once, certain she had misheard. "Excuse me?" "A temporary arrangement," he clarified. "Public, contractual. You would appear with me at specific events, dinners, family functions, a charity gala in 3 weeks." He paused, watching her carefully. "In return, you would be compensated." The word hung in the air. Elena let out a short breath, half disbelief, half offense. "You humiliated me last night," she said quietly, "and now you are asking me to pretend to be your wife." Alexander did not deny it. "I am offering you a job," he replied. "One that solves problems, yours and mine." He slid a folder across the table. Elena did not touch it. "My personal affairs have become inconvenient," he continued. "There are expectations attached to my position, expectations I intend to control." He looked at her directly. "You were calm under pressure. You did not argue. You did not beg. That matters." Elena folded her arms. "You do not even know me." "I know enough," he said, "and I know discretion when I see it." Silence stretched between them. Elena's mind raced. Her mother's hospital bill, the rent notice, the long nights that led nowhere. "What are the terms?" she asked finally. Alexander opened the folder. Inside was a clean contract, typed, precise, cold. "No emotional involvement," he said. "No interference in my work. Absolute confidentiality." He met her eyes. "And when the contract ends, you walk away with no claims." Elena studied the pages, her jaw set. "There will be one condition," she said. Alexander raised an eyebrow. "You will never speak to me the way you did last night again," she said. "Not in public, not in private." For the first time, he hesitated. Then he nodded. Elena did not sign the contract that day. She took the folder home with her, just as Alexander instructed, and spent that night sitting at her small kitchen table, reading every line under the dim yellow light above the sink. The language was clean and exact. Dates, appearances, compensation. An amount that made her chest tighten when she saw it written out in black ink. Enough to cover the hospital bill, enough to buy time. Still, she did not rush. The next morning, she returned to the Harrington Grand an hour early. She changed out of her uniform in the staff restroom and waited in the same conference room as before. This time, Alexander was already there, standing by the window, jacket off, sleeves rolled to his forearms. "You read it," he said without turning. "Yes," Elena replied. "More than once." "And?" he asked. She placed the folder on the table, unopened. "If I agree to this, there will be rules beyond what is written." Alexander turned to face her fully now. "Go on. The side mart. I will not be treated as an employee in public," she said evenly. "If I am your wife, even a fake one, then I am your equal in front of others. No corrections, no dismissals, no looks that remind me where I came from." He studied her for a long moment. "You are asking for respect." "I am setting a boundary," she corrected. He nodded once. "Agreed." "There is more," Elena continued. "I will attend the events listed. I will wear what is appropriate. I will learn what I need to learn. But when this contract ends, it ends cleanly. No leverage, no strings." Alexander exhaled slowly. "That was already my intention." She reached into the folder and pulled out the final page. "Then I will sign." The pen felt heavier than it should have in her hand. When she wrote her name, it was careful and legible, not rushed, not afraid. Alexander signed beneath it. From his jacket pocket, he removed a small box and placed it on the table. Inside was a simple gold band. No diamond. No engraving. Just a circle. "For appearances," he said. Elena closed the box without touching the ring. "I will wear it when it matters," she said. "Not before." Again he hesitated. Then he inclined his head. "Very well." They stood there in silence, the contract between them no longer theoretical. Somewhere beyond the glass walls, the hotel carried on as usual. Neither of them said it out loud, but both understood the same thing. What had just begun was not a romance. It was an agreement, and agreements had consequences. The transformation did not happen all at once. It began quietly, in borrowed spaces and measured hours, with Elena learning how to exist in a world that had never planned for her. 2 days after the contract was signed, Alexander arranged for a stylist to meet them in a private suite at the Harrington Grand. The woman was efficient, professional, and careful not to look surprised when Elena introduced herself without embarrassment or apology. They did not turn Elena into someone else. That was made clear immediately. "No costumes," Alexander said. "She needs to look credible." Elena noticed he did not say beautiful. She appreciated that more than she expected. The fittings were simple, neutral dresses, clean lines, shoes that fit properly instead of pinching her toes after an hour. When Elena looked at herself in the mirror, she did not see a stranger. She saw herself, only sharper, steadier, like someone who had always known how to stand upright, but had finally been given room to do it. Alexander watched from a chair near the window, mostly silent. Occasionally, he corrected a detail, not her posture, not her voice, just the logistics, event schedules, arrival times, which entrances to use, where to stand when cameras appeared. This was still business. Their first public appearance came sooner than Elena expected. A small charity dinner, 40 guests, private donors. Low risk, Alexander had said, a test run. They arrived together in a black sedan just after 7 in the evening. Elena stepped out first, her hands steady as she accepted Alexander's arm. She could feel the shift immediately. Heads turning, eyes assessing, people searching her face for context. Alexander leaned closer. "Smile," he said quietly. "Not too much." He did Nilissa's. "I know how to smile," Elena replied. Something about her tone made his mouth tighten. He did not argue. Inside, the questions began almost immediately. "How did you two meet? When did you get married? Why so sudden?" Elena answered calmly. She did not invent drama. She did not oversell the story. She kept it simple. They met through mutual circles. They valued privacy. They preferred substance over spectacle. Alexander listened. Halfway through the evening, A man from the board approached them, his gaze lingering a second too long on Elena's dress. "I did not realize you had a type," the man said, amused. Elena felt the old instinct rise, the urge to shrink, to step back. Alexander did not hesitate. "She is my wife," he said evenly, "and she does not exist for your evaluation." The man laughed awkwardly and excused himself. Elena looked up at Alexander, surprised. "That was unnecessary," she said softly. "It was required," he replied. "You set that condition." For the rest of the night, the tone shifted. People adjusted. Conversations softened. Elena was no longer an unknown variable. She was protected territory. On the drive home, silence filled the car. "You handled yourself well," Alexander said at last. "So did you," Elena answered. It was the closest they had come to a compliment. Over the next 2 weeks, the pattern repeated. Appearances, dinners, meetings where Elena said little but observed everything. She learned when to speak and when silence carried more weight. She learned how Alexander operated, precise, controlled, unforgiving with mistakes, especially his own. And slowly, without either of them acknowledging it, the distance between them changed. One evening, after a late meeting ran long, they ended up alone in the hotel lounge. No cameras, no audience, just low light and the hum of the city below. "You do not ask many questions," Alexander said, stirring his drink. "I am not being paid to be curious," Elena replied. That was not a criticism. She studied him for a moment. "Then what was it?" he considered. "An observation." Elena nodded. She understood observations. They were safer than assumptions. At one point, a server approached with the bill and automatically handed it to Alexander. Elena watched him sign without comment, then pause. "You still work mornings," he said, not looking at her. "Yes," she answered. "The contract did not say I should quit." "It did not," he agreed. "But it could." Elena met his eyes. "I will stop when I choose to stop." Another pause. "Very well," he said. That night, as Elena returned to her apartment, she realized something had changed. Not the contract, not the arrangement, but the way Alexander looked at her now. Not as a problem to manage, but as a presence he had begun to account for. And that, she knew, was far more dangerous than pretending to be his wife. The first real crack appeared on a night when nothing was scheduled. No dinner, no donors, no cameras waiting outside. A storm had rolled in unexpectedly, trapping them at the Harrington Grand after a late board meeting ran past midnight. The rain pressed hard against the windows, blurring the city into streaks of light and shadow. Most of the hotel had gone quiet. Elena sat on the edge of a leather chair in the private lounge, her heels finally off, her posture less guarded. Alexander stood by the window, his phone dark in his hand, the rare sign of a man with nowhere else he needed to be. "You handled yourself well today?" he said, breaking the silence. "You already said that last week," Elena replied. "Yes," he said. "This time, I meant something different." She looked up at him. "Such as?" Alexander hesitated. It was brief, but she saw it. The pause before words he was not used to saying. "You did not try to impress anyone," he said. "You did not perform." People responded to that. "That is because I am not pretending to be important," Elena said. "I am just present." Something in her answer unsettled him. He turned away from the window and sat across from her, the distance between them smaller than it had ever been. "You could have leveraged this," he said. "Asked for more. Connections, security, and raft. With Crick too." "I already have what I asked for," she replied. "Respect." Alexander studied her face, as if seeing it clearly for the first time without the filter of the contract. "Do you know why I chose you?" he asked. She shrugged lightly. "Because I did not argue." "That is what I told myself," he said. "But it is not the truth." Elena waited. "I chose you because you did not ask me to be anything other than what I was in that moment," Alexander continued. "Everyone else does. Investors, family, the board. They all want a version of me that suits them." "And I do not?" she asked. He met her gaze. "You asked for one thing, to not be diminished." The rain intensified, thunder rolling low in the distance. Elena felt the weight of the quiet settle around them. "You humiliated me that night," she said softly. "You should know that." "I do," Alexander replied. His voice was lower now, less controlled. And I do not repeat mistakes unless they serve a purpose. That one did not. Repetence, axe. The admission hung between them, fragile and unfinished. Elena rose from her chair. This arrangement works because we are honest when it matters, she said. If that changes, I walk away. Alexander stood as well. I understand. They were close enough now that she could see the fatigue beneath his composure, the cost of always being certain. For a moment, neither moved. Then, Elena stepped back, breaking the spell. Good night, she said. Good night, he replied. As she walked toward the elevator, Alexander remained where he was, aware of something new and unfamiliar. The contract had prepared him for appearances. It had not prepared him for her leaving the room and taking the quiet with her. The collapse did not come quietly. It arrived 3 days before the charity gala. During a board luncheon Elena was not supposed to attend. She had stayed behind in the private lounge, reviewing the event schedule Alexander's assistant had left on the table. She was halfway through a cup of coffee when voices drifted in from the adjacent dining room. Her name stopped her cold. You cannot seriously expect us to keep playing along, a man said, his tone sharp with impatience. No one knows who she is, where she came from, and now the press is asking questions. Elena did not move. She did not breathe. She is my wife, Alexander replied, his voice measured. For now, another voice cut in. But this arrangement is becoming a liability. Investors do not like uncertainty, and this story of yours is thin. There was a pause, long enough to hurt. Elena Brooks worked as a cleaning staff member in this very building, the first man continued. If that comes out, it will not reflect well on the brand. On you. The door opened before Elena could step away. The men fell silent when they saw her standing there, coffee untouched, schedule folded neatly in her hands. The looks on their faces told her everything. Surprise, discomfort, calculation. Alexander stood at the center of the room. His eyes flicked to her, just briefly. This is a private discussion, one of the board members said stiffly. Elena nodded. Of course, she replied calmly. I was just leaving. She turned and walked out without waiting for permission. She did not run. She did not cry. She returned to the lounge, gathered her things, and left the hotel through the service entrance, the same way she used to. Alexander found her an hour later in the underground parking garage. She was standing beside her car, her coat pulled tight around her, keys in hand. You should not have heard that, he said. But I did, Elena replied, and you did not stop it. Alexander's jaw tightened. I needed to understand where they were coming from. At my expense, she said quietly. He stepped closer. This is bigger than us. That was never the agreement, Elena said. You promised I would not be diminished. Silence fell between them, heavy and final. I will not be a liability you manage, she continued. If this arrangement embarrasses you, then it ends now. Elena, Alexander said, his voice sharper than he intended. Walking away days before the gala will confirm every suspicion they have. She met his gaze, her expression steady. Then you should have chosen differently. She opened her car door. Give me time, he said. Let me handle this. That is note of entered in entrops. She paused, just for a moment. You already chose, she replied. You just did not say it out loud. Then she got in the car and drove away, leaving Alexander alone with the echo of a deal unraveling. For the first time since the contract began, he did not know how to fix what was breaking. The night of the charity gala arrived without Elena. Alexander stood alone at the top of the marble staircase of the Harrington Grand, the city's most influential donors filling the ballroom below. Crystal lights reflected off polished floors. Cameras flashed. Conversations flowed easily, as if nothing were wrong. But something was missing. Every question he had avoided answering for weeks waited for him now, dressed in evening gowns and tailored suits. Where is your wife? Someone asked with a polite smile. Alexander nodded once. She will not be attending. The answer traveled faster than he expected. By the time dinner was served, the whispers had sharpened. Elena Brooks. Cleaning staff, contract, liability, the same words, repeated with more confidence now that she was not there to hear them. Halfway through the program, a board member stepped onto the stage to introduce Alexander as the guest of honor. Applause followed, controlled and generous. Alexander rose from his seat and walked forward, the weight of the room settling on his shoulders. He reached the podium. He did not begin with numbers. He did not thank sponsors. Instead, he looked out over the crowd and said, "Before we continue, there is something I need to address." The room stilled. "There has been speculation about my marriage," he continued, "about my wife, about who she is and where she came from." A few heads turned, some smiles faded. "Yes," Alexander said evenly, "our marriage began as a contractual arrangement." The reaction was immediate. Gasps, murmurs, shock rippling through the room. "And that contract exists because I believed control was safer than honesty," he went on. "I believed appearances mattered more than character." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "My wife worked in this building before anyone here knew her name," he said. "She earned every inch of her dignity without asking permission from power or wealth. And when that dignity was questioned, I failed to protect it." The words burned as he spoke them. "She is not here tonight because she refused to be treated as a liability," Alexander said, and she was right. A board member rose halfway from his seat. "Alexander, this is not appropriate." Alexander did not look at him. "This is the most appropriate moment I have had in years." He reached into his jacket and removed a folded document. "The contract is void," he said clearly. "Effective immediately." The cameras caught everything. He continued, "May probably half. I am not asking for forgiveness," he continued. "I am making a choice. From this point forward, I will not hide behind arrangements that diminish people who show more integrity than I ever did." The applause that followed was hesitant at first, then steadier, then unavoidable. Alexander stepped away from the podium and left the ballroom before anyone could stop him. He found Elena an hour later. She was at her apartment, standing by the window, still in her work clothes, watching rain collect on the glass. She did not turn when the knock came. She already knew who it was. "I ended it," Alexander said when she opened the door. "The contract, publicly." Elena studied his face. "And your board?" "They will adjust," he replied. "They always do." She said nothing. "I did not do it to win you back," Alexander continued. "I did it because you were right, and because I do not want to build anything else on a lie." Elena held his gaze for a long moment. "This does not erase what happened," she said, "and it does not promise anything." "I know," he answered. "I am not offering a deal." She stepped aside. "Come in," she said. "And if you stay without conditions." Alexander nodded. For the first time, there was no contract between them, only a choice. The morning light came softly. Not through glass walls or chandeliers, but through the narrow window of Elena's apartment, catching dust in the air and warming the small kitchen table where 2 cups of coffee sat untouched. Alexander stood near the door, jacket folded over his arm, no assistants waiting, no phone vibrating in his hand. For the first time since she had met him, he looked uncertain in a way that did not feel strategic. "I should go," he said. "You have work." "So do you," Elena replied. "Yes," he said, "but not the kind that can wait." She studied him for a moment, then nodded. "We will talk later." He did not argue. He respected the boundary this time. They did not kiss. They did not promise anything. When the door closed behind him, Elena leaned back against it and exhaled, unsure whether she had just opened her life or protected it. 3 weeks passed. The headlines faded. The gala became old news. The board reshuffled. Alexander Reed remained at the helm of his company, but something in his public image shifted. He was quieter, less polished, more careful with his words. Elena noticed it first in small ways. The cleaning supervisor called her into the office one afternoon, confused. "Your schedule has changed," she said. "Day shift only, full benefits, effective immediately." Elena frowned. "Why?" The supervisor shrugged. "Corporate decision." Elena said nothing, but she knew. That evening, Alexander met her not at the hotel, but at a small neighborhood restaurant 2 blocks from her apartment. No reservations, no private room, just a corner table and mismatched chairs. "You did not have to do that," Elena said as she sat down. "I know," Alexander replied. "That is why I did." They talked slowly, about work, about mistakes, about the strange quiet that followed choosing differently. There was no grand confession, no sudden transformation, just honesty, practiced carefully. Weeks later, Alexander asked her to walk with him through the Harrington Grand, not through the executive entrance, through the service corridor. Some employees looked up, startled. Some smiled. Some did not know what to make of it. Alexander did not correct them. At the end of the hallway, he stopped and reached into his pocket. He did not pull out a diamond. He did not kneel. He placed the old contract between them on a utility table and set a lighter beside it. "I do not want this," he said. "I want you. Without leverage, without roles." Elena looked at the papers, at the signatures, at the life that could have been defined by them. She struck the lighter herself. The flame curled the edges first, then swallowed the ink. When it was done, nothing remained but ash. A year later, the wedding was small. No press, no spectacular, just a courthouse, a quiet lunch, and a ring Elena chose herself. Simple, gold, real. When someone later asked how they met, Elena smiled and said, "At work." Alexander did not correct her. Because the truth was not how it began. The truth was how it ended. What started as a contract became a choice. And what was fake only survived because respect made it real.